Hello. Today's video is my response to a comment that was left in response to my video introducing continuum movement. And the question had to do with this person's experience when she tried, I'm assuming it was a she, I can't quite tell, but when she tried the humming sound and found that there was vibration in some parts of her body and not in others. I'll read you what she wrote. She said, "Interesting. When I hum with hands on mid-back and ribs, I can feel vibration there as I hum. When I tried again with hands on my third chakra, as I work on resilience and personal power in my process to clear issues of abuse, I could not feel any vibration and felt that area like stone. I tried a few more times and got some sensation, but not much." So this is a really interesting comment and experience, and I really appreciate the person who putting it there, and I'm really appreciating questions and comments as they come along. So please keep them coming. It's really interesting to me because it relates to a very common experience that people have doing continuum, particularly early on in their experience, or if they have a lot of trauma or some kind of intense trauma like abuse that tends to be stored in the body. So I think I mentioned in the other video, I tend to think of when we offer a sound to our tissues, we put our hand somewhere and we do a hum, for example, or some other sound. There are many different sounds we use in continuum, that the vibration of the sound goes into the tissues and kind of shakes them up a bit. It vibrates them, which stimulates fluid movement. And as Emily Conrad, founder of Continuum, noted, fluid tends to move in spirals, pulsations, and waves. And so we tend to experience that kind of fluid movement in response to these sounds. And typically in a continuum session, or dive as we call it, we'll make a series of sounds and use a series of breaths. We'll make one, and then we listen to the response. Where there's more response, so where you have movement in response, for example, or you have a lot of sensation in response, it's an indication there's more fluidity. The fluid is free to move, to flow. There's flow, if you will. Where there's less sensation or less movement, they tend to go together, there's usually some history stored there, or a reaction to history, a protective response. Most often, the tissues respond to a trauma, especially an overwhelming trauma like abuse usually is, by densifying. The speed of our life also can create densification in our tissues. And where the tissues are dense, they're more like ice. It's as if the fluid is frozen and it can't move. The vibration goes in, it tries to shake it up, but there may not be much happening initially. Emily talked about how many of us are paralyzed. She worked with, and we work with Continuum with people with various kinds of paralysis, nerve damage where they shouldn't be able to move, and movement starts to happen as the shock that's been stored in their system from the event that caused the paralysis begins to dissolve as new pathways develop. The old injured pathways don't have to be the ones creating the movement. Movement can happen. So someone might have, say, a spinal cord injury and not be paralyzed in their lives. But many of us who don't have those kinds of injuries walk around in our lives in some state of fear, where we're frozen, we're paralyzed, we're in the same old rut in a way. We keep moving or not moving in the same patterns. And I think that's what this person has run up against in the area of the third chakra. That's interesting. Not only do our tissues tend to densify in a protective reaction when there's trauma or some kind of conditional force coming into our system, but also our energetic field can densify. And we may experience that in relation to the chakras. If you're working on regaining your personal power, you may experience some densification, some holding in that area. So one of the things Emily would say is stay the course, meaning persevere. Keep doing your continuum practice or whatever it is you do. She was talking about continuum, of course. And in continuum, we have a concept of layering. And the idea is that each time we stay the course, we persevere, we do the continuum again, we do the sequence that we've learned again. In this case, do the hums again, or whatever else you know of continuum. Another layer of conditioning, another layer of history and story, and perhaps trauma can dissolve bit by bit, like peeling the layers of an onion, except that it's more like dissolving those layers. As each layer dissolves, there's the possibility of more fluidity. It's something like ice melting, and more movement becomes possible. So I recommend continuing to try the hums. And it doesn't have to be just in that area. You might find yourself doing your hums somewhere else, like you said, the mid-back worked, and feeling the vibration. Maybe you start to get some movement. Maybe you start to feel a wave going through. And it's kind of like the waves coming up against the shore, coming up against the solid part of the body where there's holding, where there's shock, where there's densification. The waves come up and start to dissolve it. Gradually, over time, with repetition of doing different kinds of continuum activities, having these different kinds of inputs, the tissues and the energy fields can start to open and to let go, to melt. And then you start to have more vibration there, you start to have more sensation there, and you start to have movement. So something to look forward to. And it's such an important aspect of continuum. People often think, this should feel wonderful. And often it does feel wonderful in the beginning. And then as the layers melt, we might come up against those places where we've been holding, where our fear sits tight, literally tight, where we're paralyzed. And that's often not comfortable. So helpful to keep humming, keep using your continuum. You may find it useful to use the Luna breath. If you look at the last video that I've posted on the Luna breath, I demonstrate the Luna breath, and it's extremely soothing, slows us down. It can really help things to melt, especially where there's been trauma and the nervous system is held and there's shock in the system, which is what's being described here, where there's that kind of, nothing moves. It's like frozen ice. The Luna breath can be incredibly helpful for just dissolving the whole field, really, and the whole body, slowing us down so something else becomes possible. So I hope that's helpful for now. And thank you again for the comment. I look forward to more. And I'd love to hear about how the practice is going for you, any questions or comments that you have that I can respond to in another video. So, thank you.